And I had a client ask me about this the other day, where it's like, so, like, do I have to be carnivore? Like, do you have to be? Like, no. But
Hmm.
like when he starts asking about, like, if I have this plant, will this be okay? If I have an apple every now and again, will this be okay? It's like, I don't know. It's just raising questions. You're always going to have a question when you're introducing some of these plant foods. Are they going to be okay? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to say.
And it's relative too, right? Because someone with an autoimmune issue, if they have an apple, that could actually trigger that off. It has before. I know someone who is so sensitive to these things that even just using spices and seasonings gave them autoimmunity. And they ate nothing else except meat with seasonings for 40 years. And they still had autoimmunity. And then it wasn't until they dropped the spices and the seasonings and just went meat and water only that their autoimmunity went away. And so that's like how strong this stuff is to people that are sensitive to it. And but it's affecting all of us. It's going to negatively affect all of us. And so, we just need to understand that some people are going to be more sensitive than others, people from different ethnic backgrounds. So this lady in particular was Inuit descent in the First Nation, Canadian First Nation people. And so, I mean, her ethnic background, I mean, they didn't eat, they were eating just meat, seal, fish, polar bears, and whales up until a century ago. Right. So they really didn't have any time to adapt to this. And so 40 years ago, she's just 60 now. She had a baby, and as soon as that baby was weaned, it started getting very sensitive to anything besides meat, and would actually have seizures with anything except meat. And so they're like, "All right, we're just eating meat," and that's totally culturally appropriate. And then that wasn't weird for them at all because they're coming from their background. And so they did, but she had seasoning, she had spices, and she developed 4 autoimmune issues. And then she, sort of came across the idea that there are these plant toxins, and that, just getting rid of everything just down to meat and water, that can actually give a lot of benefit. And she's just like, well, there's no way that can be. Um, but she's like, okay, I'll try it for 30 days. You never know unless you try it. And she tried it 30 days. Her autoimmune issues started clearing up, and now they're gone, and they have not come back. And because she has not gone back, because this is a toxicity relationship. It's not you have a disease. No, it's just like there's this toxin that comes in your body and it makes you sick. That's what's happening. And so now she's removed that from her life, and then she doesn't have the toxicity anymore. So, it's very important for some people, but it is important for all of us. And just understanding that these toxins are not there for us. They did not, Foxglove did not make digitalis to, millions of years. I mean, they made this millions of years ago, right? They didn't make this so that one day this hairless ape would come down and go like, "Oh, you know what, I've just trashed myself with smoking and drinking my whole life, and my heart's going into failure. Like, I want to help that little shaved monkey, like that's important to me. So let's make this now." And so millions of years later, we can help that guy. Of course they didn't. This is completely coincidental. They made that poison to actually stop the heart of animals trying to eat that plant. They're like, you touch me, your heart stops, you're dead. And so, that's what it's there for. And that's why, anything outside of this dose is either ineffectual or fatal by a very small margin. I mean, we're talking micrograms here, so a millionth of a gram. We're talking you get this wrong by 50, 100 micrograms, you kill somebody, you know, or don't do anything, and so it's very, very, very sensitive. And and so it's just it's not there for us. Plants don't want us to eat them. They're becoming more and more aware of the level of consciousness that plants have. They can see us. They can see what color shirt we're wearing when we're standing next to them. They don't have eyes, but they have proteins and receptors all over their entire body that we have in the back of our retina that recognize visual light and things like that. So they don't have eyes; they are eyes, and they have what looks like neural networks and things like that. And they don't have a central nervous system, so they don't have a brain, but their whole body acts as a brain. you know and so it's actually pretty remarkable. They scream, they can send off chemical signals of distress to their neighbors, send off waves like ultrasonic waves. They can speak to each other. They've figured out that like the different sort of frequencies and waves, and say it's like, hey, I'm thirsty, I'm dry. Like, hey, I need potassium or phosphorus. Hey, I need this over here. Well, like that they're actually talking to each other about that. And you can actually pick this up and go, oh shit, he needs water. So you can actually water them now because we're recognizing what those mean. They communicate through their root system. There's like a fungus system that is like two different kinds, and different plants that use a different fungus system. They can communicate to any other plant and tree that uses that same fungus system, even if it's not the same species. And there's generally like a sentinel tree in a forest that like runs the forest, is like the monarch of that forest, and actually directs traffic, and they actually can send water and nutrients through their root system, through this fungal root system, to different parts of the forest. So if it's like this part over here is going through a bit of a drought and this over here is flush, they can actually move water miles over and feed these trees over here through the root system. It's absolutely crazy. So they have an entire society and structure about how to survive as a colony. And we're just saying, just like, oh yeah, they just grow up and that's just all it is. It's nothing. There's nothing really to it. We just eat them and rip them apart, and it's just nothing. 100 years ago, we thought that same thing about animals. We didn't think that they could feel pain, and it didn't matter if you tortured them, because it wasn't torture. They didn't feel pain like we did because they didn't have brains like we do. Well, that's obviously stupid, but we're doing the same thing now with plants, and we're just because we don't understand how they work, because they're different to us. We think that they have no consciousness whatsoever, and that they don't communicate, they can't feel pain. It's not the same thing. And then people say that they react and respond to damage like we would pain. They send the signal down, the signal comes back up, and there's a response, and they scream, and they send off signals of distress and all these sorts of things, right? So that's pain. But they don't recognize it like we do. It's not the same thing. How do you know? You don't know that. All you know is it's screaming, right? And that's what someone said. I can't remember who said the quote, but it was earlier last century, and he was a famous guy, and he was a vegetarian. And he said, vegetarians are people who have never heard a tomato scream, right? And that was what he's saying, is it's like, look, I've never heard, I hear animals scream, and that bothers me. I've never heard a tomato scream, so that's fine. Well, now we hear tomatoes scream. Tomatoes scream. All right. So now we know that. And so understanding that all life will scream and try to fight for its survival. What do you do then? Well, it's just not the same. Well, we said that about animals a century ago, and we were wrong then. I think we're wrong now. And so, we need to understand that. We need to be realistic about the world that we live in. Plants don't want you to eat them. They do feel pain. They do suffer. They do scream. They do cry out. They do try to defend themselves. When they start getting eaten by something, they actually produce more toxins, and they can produce toxins specific to the animal or insect eating them. And this is why, when you have like a bruised piece of fruit, or plant like celery or something like that, you have that bruise or damage, or insect starts eating it, you don't eat it because it's bad. Well, why is that? I mean, no one ever told me that as a kid. My mom would say like, oh no, you don't do that. You don't want that part, because the plant's bad if an insect started eating into it, or if there's a sign of like a fungal infection, something like that. It's bad. And no one ever explained that to me. So I didn't know. I was like, well, is there like bacteria on the bug or something like that, or just something wrong with it? But what happens is that the plant mounts a defense and actually starts becoming more toxic and starts making more poison, which is why you see partial eating from a caterpillar or a something, and then it stops. It doesn't eat the whole leaf. It just eats some, and then it stops, because it starts going and mounting the attack and starts eating, but they start producing so much poison that it's just like, oh, can't eat this anymore, and they go somewhere else, right? And they scream and send off a signal to all the other plants around them, and all those plants start making more of those toxins to that caterpillar or aphid or whatever the hell is eating it. So, these are actually very sophisticated creatures, not necessarily creatures, but life forms. And they are the dominant life form on Earth. 97+% of life on Earth is plant life, of the biomass is plant life. And so, it's you ignore that at your own peril. Like, these do have toxins. That's just a fact. And they don't want us to eat them. We are not biologically designed to eat these things. We've been millions of years out of the arms race between plants and animals. This is a well-known phenomenon that plants become more and more toxic, so less and less animals can eat them, and then animals having to adapt and evolve to be able to weather the storm on certain plant toxins. But 10,000 years is not long enough, and 100 years is definitely not long enough. So while it hits them harder, and they may have seizures as babies, or they may get autoimmune diseases from spices, we all get sick, and we all get damaged, and it builds up eventually over years and decades, and causes serious disease. Just like smoking doesn't necessarily just kill you with one cigarette, right? But over the years, over the decades, this damages you. And so we recognize that as a poison. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, they were smoking cigarettes before they got out and raced the Tour de France on a single gear bike on dirt roads. I mean, it's just absolute, just animals, right? And they would smoke cigarettes because they thought it helped open up their lungs so they could perform better as athletes. They were smoking to make them more athletic because that's what they thought. Right now, we're like, oh, yeah, well, we know it's bad. Well, we didn't always know it's bad. Now we think salads aren't bad and in fact good for you. They thought smoking was good for you. We think salads are good for us. They're not. We were wrong both times. You don't want any of this garbage. And so it's just understanding that it's a really important thing to remember and to
Yeah.
understand.